Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Flippa Buyer webinar. My name is Blake Hutchison, and I'm the CEO here at Flippa. And it's my absolute pleasure to be joined by Stefan von Imhof, who is our head of product here at Flippa. Welcome, Stefan. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Now, we should say that we are here from bright and sunny Melbourne. It's Flippa HQ, and we've also got our team from Austin, Texas, joining us today. And it's going to be a really fun and exciting 30 to 40 minutes of information about how to use Flippa, but also the importance of this digital asset class and why people are so excited about it. Stefan, you've got a really interesting story with Flippa, so let's start there because you have actually sold a business on Flippa before.
Sure. So I'm Stefan. I'm the head of product here at Flippa.com, and I've been a buyer and a seller on Flippa in the past. And a few years ago, actually sold a e-commerce site, an online retailer of video game accessories on Flippa. And I was really pleased with the experience. It was a great experience. Flippa was able to find a buyer for me rather quickly. The buyer paid above my asking price, which was always really nice. And so last year I had the opportunity to come join the Flippa team full time, and here I am today.
Fantastic. Well, let's get started. So there's a couple of things we're going to do today. Firstly, you're going to take the reins as interviewer, and you're going to shoot some questions over to me about what it means to be a buyer in this landscape, what it means to acquire your first asset, why are people actually doing that today, and then we'll flip gears and we'll talk a little bit about the Flippa platform itself, and you'll expose some of the great work that you and the team have been doing and give first-time buyers I guess some behind the scenes help as it relates to engaging with and using the Flippa platform.
Absolutely.
Alrighty, let's get started. I'm going to bring up a couple of slides here, and I think one of the first things that we should do is just focus on the fact that there is this huge growing community of buyers who are now interested in acquiring their first website, their first app, or anything else in the digital asset class for that matter. And of course, the mix of what you can buy these days has changed and changed dramatically over the last few years. So we'll start very quickly just with a story from one of Flippa's buyers. And her name is Stacey Caprio. She's actually based in Chicago. And Stacey's similar to the many buyers that we see on Flippa today. In Stacey's case, a bit disenfranchised with corporate America, we might say, Stefan, and she's decided to go and acquire a couple of smaller assets on the Flippa platform. The great thing about Stacey's journey is she now owns her future, as you can see here from the quote. Stacey's actually acquired over 4 sites. She's got intentions to acquire a number of additional sites on Flippa over the next 12 months. But she says here, forever grateful to Flippa for being the catalyst that helped me transition from being the girl who felt trapped and chained in her cubicle to the girl I am now. Living in my dream apartment overlooking the Bean and Lake Mission in Chicago.
Sounds awesome.
Sounds awesome. I'd encourage everyone to check out sidehustlenation.com, which is Stacey's blog. She does a really good job of helping first-time buyers navigate not only Flippa, but this space in general. And so it's a really great resource. Check out that blog, sidehustlenation.com. Stacey does a really good job there. All right, Stefan, over to you.
Absolutely. So we've got a bunch of people on the line who've never bought before on Flippa. And I think the big question on everyone's mind is, why buy a digital asset in the first place? What makes this asset class so unique and so special?
Yeah, so one of the things we wanted to do with this webinar is give people some context to start with. And I think this is a really great question to begin with. So clearly, interest in this digital asset class has grown substantially, exponentially over the last couple of years. And so why? And that's your question. And I think there's 3 reasons. So the first one is it's a lower risk investment. The second one is that you typically get to acquire something with established traction. And that means you start off on the right foot. And the third one is that should you run it well and should you acquire something which is already performing well, you can get good returns. So let's just tap into that a little bit more. So you can buy something on Flippa, or for that matter, in other environments also, that you can buy something on Flippa for as low as a couple of $100. Now you can of course go up to 5 million if you have that means and that capacity, which few of us do.
I do not.
I do not, but some of us do. Now, the important thing is that you can buy in at a significantly lower entry cost than other asset classes. And so that means that almost anyone can enter this space and feel confident that they can enter the space and play around, get familiar with it, and start to develop subject matter expertise. The next great reason is established traction. So isn't it interesting? Most people choose to start a small business or start a website from scratch. That means that you're doing all the heavy lifting up front. The great thing about acquiring something is it comes with some traction. Now, it could be that the design is well established. It could be that it's significantly established by way of great content, established e-commerce operational procedures, brand, contractors, and of course, revenue. Now, there's nothing like established traction because it is difficult to find your first 100 customers. And typically you've got 3 to 6 months at least startup time frame. And so you do save time and money in that startup phase. And then finally, let's talk about good returns because this is a really, really important one. So let's play this out. Let's say for argument's sake, you acquired a $15,000 asset. Let's say for argument's sake, that $15,000 asset was deriving $500 net profit per month. So it's doing $6,000 per year. So that is a 35% return on your investment. And so you should be aiming for 30 to 40% annual return on your investment. And that's extraordinary. You don't get that through other asset classes.
No, that's fantastic. And, you know, I fundamentally believe that digital assets are one of the last few undervalued asset classes, you know, in the world. And I also believe that we're just in the early innings of this right now. So it's really exciting.
Okay.
Excellent. So, Blake, tell me a little bit about who are the buyers and the sellers that make up the Flippa community?
Yeah, so we won't spend too much time on this, but the reason we point it out is because our first-time buyers are actually going up against a fairly sophisticated lot. And so it's important you know that there is a very, very established group of proven investors in this space. So you want to school up quickly to be able to participate. And that's actually not that different to, I guess, buying property, where there's some people who are more experienced than others. And so you should consider who's in the network with you. So of course, you've got our network of first-time buyers and those people who are buying digital assets and or businesses to run. So we call that the boss generation. They're buying to own and operate. Now, of course, then you've got the seller, those people who are ready to exit. They're selling to reinvest and do something new. And of course, there's amazing overlap. Sellers are buyers and buyers are sellers. Yep. And so people should recognize that. There's a lot of people with a history of doing this for many, many years. And then finally, this investor group, this sophisticated group who are buying to aggregate and scale.
Yeah.
Now, we have examples of people who are buying 10, 20, 30, 50 assets per annum. And so know that when you're in the discussion forum in a Flippa environment, which we'll go through a little bit later, you're actually coming up against a huge pool of buyers. And so it's important that you understand how that works. And Stefan will go through that a little bit later.
Yeah, you're definitely going up against some almost institutional investors, but like Blake said, we'll show you how you can stand out when you're discussing buying the asset from the seller. So Blake, what should buyers first look for? They've never done this before. What should buyers first look for when they're just trying to get into the space for the first time?
Yeah, there's lots to tackle here, but we've decided to distill this down into 3 points. And the first one is that you should look for safe bets. And so what we mean by that is clearly we all have risk and clearly we all have a risk appetite. And some people have a greater appetite than others. Don't spend more than you feel comfortable spending. And remember that even though we hear from most buyers that they're looking for a passive income stream, there's almost nothing that is truly passive.
Right.
So you have to have a little bit of spare change up your sleeve to be able to reinvest in the asset itself, bring eyeballs, additional eyeballs, and try and get a increased ROI than the prior owner was realizing. And so that's why we say safe bets. Don't spend more than you feel comfortable spending. And the great thing about Flippa, of course, is the broad range of assets and the broad range of price points. The second piece is subject matter expertise. Now, we're all good at something. And so the great thing about Flippa is you can discover, and you've got some great questions that you'll take people through a little bit later, but you can discover what the existing owner of the asset has done well, hasn't done well, and is good at or isn't good at.
Right.
And you want to find an asset where you can apply your own subject matter expertise. Are you fantastic at search engine optimization? Great. Go and acquire a content site and get the optimization that you think you can get from it. Are you a fantastic salesperson? In which case, perhaps acquire an e-commerce business. Maybe you can do some better deals on inventory. So think about what you can do to add value to the asset that you're acquiring. And that stands to be the case for an inexpensive asset or a lower value asset like $250 starter site, all the way up to something more mature. And then finally, and I think this is really important, buy something that you can imagine working on for some time.
Yeah.
It's very rare that you buy something and you don't have to invest at least an additional 12 months to get a very, very strong return on your investment. And so you want to be excited by what you're working on. And it sounds simple, but we have people who are really, really passionate about finance. Therefore, they're looking at finance-based websites. We have people who are super passionate about travel. Therefore, they're looking at travel-based websites. Yeah. We've got some people who think that they've got logistical agreements with people and are therefore looking at cannabis-type websites because they believe they can add value there.
Absolutely. I really like this last one about something that you can imagine yourself working on. I know when I sold my site, one of the reasons I sold was because I was kind of getting tired of the video game industry. The buyer, on the other hand, was really getting into the video game industry, so it was a perfect match. So when it comes to paying for sites, what should a buyer expect to pay? There's a lot of confusion around this right now. And so tell us what buyers should expect to pay for different types of digital assets.
Yeah. Now, it's kind of how long is a piece of string, particularly given the broad nature of the assets that are available on Flippa. And so what we're going to do today very quickly is we're going to just showcase what we've found from looking at over 50,000 assets sold on Flippa. And so we're going to look at content, e-commerce, and SaaS. And this is really just to give people a guide. So firstly, we've got up on the screen the average for a particular asset type and also the max that we have seen. And the importance behind those two data points is that you get to see the difference between what is the norm and where there are anomalies and why people will pay overs. And so if we look at content, you can see there that the average on Flippa is 1.95 times. Now, a lot of people quote in monthly. These are annualized numbers. So it's 1.95 times annual net profit, or SDE, seller discretionary earnings, which is where there are some adjustments made for non-carry forward costs. And of course, if you've got questions, we can tackle those here, as well as after the webinar, we'll be sending along the details of this slide deck, as well as being able to answer any questions that come from specific buyers. So feel free to ask as many questions as you might have today. And so we've also seen in the content space some anomalies, where people will realize that someone hasn't necessarily gotten the most out of the commercial opportunity. And so they're paying, in this particular case, 6 times annual net profit. Now they're doing that because they realize that there's significant areas of weakness, significant areas that they can optimize and get a very, very speedy return on that investment. And that's a really important point to make. Now, e-commerce, you can see there that the average is slightly less at 1.85 times. It's essentially the same thing, rounded up to 2 if you like, but the max is slightly lower. And we find that in e-commerce, the max is slightly lower because typically there is a bigger buyer base looking for content websites. And typically people can find ways to better optimize content sites than potentially an e-commerce business. And of course, remember that there's so much variety in e-commerce. You've got fulfilled by Amazon, you've got dropship, you've got your own warehousing direct to consumer opportunities. And then finally, SaaS. You can see that the average is slightly higher. And that's pretty obvious, isn't it? It's because there's a recurring revenue nature of it. Now, the other thing to bear in mind when you look at these is age has a big impact on price.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Absolutely.
And so something which is over 2, 3, 4 years old, typically you will have to pay slightly above these averages. And the reason being is there's an established brand. There's very clear understanding of any seasonal or seasonality impacts to the business. And finally, you get more established operational procedures.
Right.
So people will typically like to pay a little bit more for an aged website.
Now, there are some exceptions to this rule, especially around starter sites. Can you talk a little bit about starter sites and how they differ in terms of the what you should expect to pay?
Yeah, it's a super good point, because of course, when you're buying something that's a starter site, even though there may be some claims of revenue, the reality is that you're less likely to buy it on a revenue performance or net profit performance basis. What you're buying is something off the shelf that you can run with. So something that gets you up and going, that feels like you're part of the digital, that enables you to feel like you're part of the digital economy and gives you a playground from which to invest. And so they're not priced on an average net profit or STE basis. It's typically in the eye of the beholder. It is, how do you value what you see and how do you think you can add value to what you are acquiring?
Absolutely. Excellent.